Arc 6, The Corridor of Memories. Chapter 65, the second, the fifth, followed by. Majestic and undaunted, the red-haired great man who had appeared in this place, Reed Astrea. The unforeseen entrance of the man, his sharp blue eyes lacking any consideration for the other side's surprise, his very presence caused everyone, even Gluttony, to be at a loss for words. Reed, hey, the hell yous fassin' out for, you all? Is me be in here something so surprisin', huh? It's a matter of course, aye? And seeing Subaru and the others completely petrified, Reed slammed his left eye covered under his own eye patch and struck the sandals he was wearing onto the floor. A gesture implicitly referring to the entire tower. Reed, I wasn't even able to take a nap cause of all the damn noise happenin' both outside and inside. It's so borin' that there ain't even drinks here in the first place, and then this happens. No way I tolerate it. Subaru, that's completely your own convenience, isn't it? As you can see, we're busy here in our own way. Don't make things more complicated. Reed, ha. Ya said something, young fish? Sorry, but your voice is so low I couldn't hear a thing. Well, even if I could hear it, I'd still say I couldn't hear it. Subaru, nasty stubborn. And what was nasty was not merely his stubbornness, but also his timing. Too weak to blame him, not enough substance to protest him. Subaru, stumped by the violent and relentless words, realized that he was feeling afraid of Reed and tightened his fists. His soul remembered the sense of defeat pertaining to Reed's existence. That was not simply because of what all Reed had made him experience back when he used to be filled with suspicion. He had faced his repulsive audacity even in the previous loop. Subaru's heart was not supposed to have feared Reed this much back then. But now, at this moment, why could he feel it peculiarly, unusually severely? That was... Subaru, because my soul clearly recognizes you as an enemy, huh? Reed, nice, young fish. Don't mean to raise your status from a young fish, but I'll commend ya for not misunderstanding that I ain't any convenient support. Subaru, even if you said, rejoice I'm your support, there's no way it'd be possible to fully accept such words by you. Reed, ha. Sure said something. Unraveling his fangs in ferocity, Reed laughed like a shark while Subaru concealed the chills it sent down to his spine. Reed's proclamation just now was also a hopeless pronouncement of a certain kind. However, Subaru had never thought of Reed as something like an ally from the beginning. That had merely been affirmed. He had not been mistaken. And upon the arrival of Subaru and Reed's exchange at a point where it paused. Gluttony, well say, Reed Astrea. Yes, the personage who had promptly returned to his true spirit, Gluttony, called out Reed's name. Right in the center of the frozen isle, the Sin Archbishop of Insanity was standing literally in the middle of Subaru and the others and Reed, and upon being glared by that line of sight glinted with vicious emotions, Reed looked towards Gluttony and snorted his nose in displeasure. Reed, oh, what is it, midget? What a filthy midget. What is it, filthy midget-chan? Gluttony, you're the first-generation sword saint, aren't you? Then why is that here again, huh? According to our memories, you, the trial taker, shouldn't be able to come down from the upper floor, isn't that right? Ignoring his humiliating nickname and provocative efforts, Gluttony fired the question at Reed. The memories he had spoken of were clearly Subaru's memories, which was quite infuriating, but Subaru and the others also shared the same question that he had raised. The trial taker of the second layer, Reed Astrea's arrival onto the fourth layer. This was something Subaru had also witnessed in the previous loop, and had considered it as one of the 5 obstacles which must be cleared. The trick behind the phenomenon of him freely walking within the tower was entirely unknown. However, that phenomenon only occurred at this stage of the game. Should it be said that he had been able to walk around all this time but simply chose not to, then the issue would be entirely different. Gluttony, whether there's a peculiar trick behind it, or whether the rules of the tower itself changed. Either way, you doing this is out of calculations, and we have no choice but to rethink the full course in a lot of ways. After having the appetizer is the main dish and then the dessert, that's standard, you know. Right? Reed, don't ramble bout such incomprehensible bullshit, filthy midget bloody bastard. Reed, I can't come down? Brace your eyes and look, you. Yet can understand the stupidity you're talking about by talking a look, you. Hey you over there. Whilst speaking, Reed pitched forward towards Gluttony in displeasure. His form, with his white fangs unraveled and glaring with a single eye, was indeed like the natural style of a delinquent. However, the pressure his self exerted was incomparably more than those of delinquents who gather in front of convenience stores, enough to make one feel threatened for their life by simply its aftermath. Should it be equated, then what was standing there was a beast which was the mixture of a tiger, a bear, a lion and a dragon all in a single body. Clad in every possible hint of violence, Reed bared his fangs. Reed, don't joke round, you. I'm doing whatever I want to however I want to. No way I'd accept someone's instructions, you. Don't be joking round, you. First of all, right back at ya, the hell about you? Whose permission did you take to be making a racket here? Hey, you over there, you. Gluttony, how amazing, how unbearable, it's impossible to get talking. Turning the holy sword of ice he held in his hand into fragments of ice, Gluttony combed up his long bangs. It seemed even Gluttony couldn't fare well with an opponent who was this difficult to get dialogue across to. Even Amelia, for whom it was no use arguing, had hints of struggling, but Reed was multiple levels above Amelia in terms of getting conversation across to. However, Gluttony said, although pertaining to the opponent this incompatible, and resumed. Gluttony, as prey it's the finest quality. Our appetite, as gourmet, is starting to crave binging too. Eat it away. Chew it up. Lick it all. Attain the flavor. Gluttonous drinking sue. Glutton eats sue. Roaring, maddening in excitement and ferocity, Gluttony positioned his limbs onto the frozen floor and glared at Reed. Making his lengthy tongue peek through his white canines, as per the command of the aberrant appetite which indulged in the memories of others, impossible to be understood by ordinary men, his saliva drooled and dripped onto the floor. And lay, which cults in Archbishop representing Gluttony, lay batten Catos. Whether that statement was boastful or conceited, anyhow Gluttony no, lay batten Catos gave his name, kicked the floor of ice the immediately following instant, and commenced his sprint with the velocity of a fired arrow. That spectacle was like the hunting ground of a ferocious quadruped, and his dash was wild enough to make one truly hallucinate that as well. Reed, what a pain. Focusing on batten Catos charging ahead madly, Reed put a single finger in his ear and grumbled as if troubled. Reed, well then, I'm the swordsman, Horoi Laurier. Subaru, who even is that? Reed, the guy who lived beside my house in my hometown. Subaru thoughtlessly shouted at that excessively grand alias, to which Reed responded quite indifferently. Afterwards, he pulled his finger out of his ear and looked down onto batten Catos immediately before him. Let us eat Sue. Reed, puttin' aside if the frizzlin' Nachon said this, but being told that by a dirty midgetchon like you ain't making me happy. The zoot Sue. As batten Catos advanced in with his large mouth open, his body was intensely shifted horizontally. That was Reed's right leg crudely unleashed, its kick captured batten Catos' torso directly horizontally in order to energetically strike him into the wall of the aisle. Egg. Hook. Reed, don't make the sound of a chicken bein' strangled, you. Let me tell ya, a chicken tastes delicious after bein' strangled, but I ain't intendin' to eat you. Don't care about gluttony or whatever. Reed, ya came jumpin' at an adult. Hope you're prepared for a spankin', you. Despite being caught up in the vigor, batten Catos retained his senses and gave a short grin, displaying extraordinary endurance. The subsequent instant he positioned his arm upward, intending to bring down the dagger attached to his wrist onto Reed's leg with fierce strength, which invited Reed to twitch his eyebrows. While speaking, Reed pushed batten Catos' body onto the wall with his leg, and started running across the frozen aisle with a single leg at an incomprehensible speed. Of course, having been pushed onto the wall and being slid across the surface of the wall which had the ruggedness of ice here and there, batten Catos was in no state to be able to resist. That damage was enormous and destructive. Gaietsu. Reed, hey, don't you start screamin' by just this. This way it won't even be something to consider. This ain't even children's play in my era yet. Brats these days are not only filthy but also meager. Hey, you. Declaring with displeasure, Reed stopped his feet and turned around halfway through at that spot. With his leg which had pressed batten Catos onto the wall unfastened, the body of the Sin Archbishop slid down. Before that, the left leg he had balanced himself with launched a rotating kick which energetically slammed into batten Catos' side, and his petite frame was lightly blown off. With unusual vigor, batten Catos sprang onto the floor whilst taking a defensive stance. The Sin Archbishop, rotating at a high speed and bleeding, went through the gap between Amelia and Julius and finally tumbled onto the aisle's interior horizontal to Subaru and Beatrice. As he lay spread-eagled, fallen on the floor, no longer did he display any of his former strength. All this was easily enough to kill anyone, but perhaps because of his exceptional awareness of defense, that was possibly not the case here. Subaru, that guy, was the formidable enemy who had been overpowering both Amelia-chan and Julius till now, right? Beatrice, no question in that, in fact. But this one exceeds norms even more, I suppose. That's why, respectively, it can be said that the situation has worsened, in fact. Subaru, the war cards have only changed places, huh? Beatrice, that too, to a worse opponent, I suppose. Beatrice, whilst tightly holding Subaru's hand, was vigilant regarding Reed in front instead of the collapsed, immobile Baton Catos. The same went for Emilia or Julius as well. The war situation had already changed from the battle against gluttony to a new warrior. Even in the midst of that, Emilia, really, thank you for beating the Sin Archbishop. And, can't we just go ahead and get along like this? First, Emilia spoke to Reed in a friendly manner. She offered a proposal for peace befitting of her, however in response Reed shook his head, shrugged his shoulders, and stomped on the floor. Clearing away the proposal with those 3 gestures of his body, Reed scratched his head. Reed, ha, don't be saying such demotivating shit, you. Actually, the hell's up with ya, you. You're too frizzlin', the heck's happenin', it ain't a joke. Aren't ya fiercely frizzlin'? Why re ya here in this place, you? The hell ya doin' in this situation? Don't be tourin' round this sandy bullshit place, instead let's go for drinks tonight, you. Emilia, this is also the second time though. Julius, unfortunately, she cannot accompany you for your evening drinks. The reason being. Reed, oh? Julius, a knight of peace shall not visit you, an illusion. Saying so, as if intercepting the inelegant comment, the sole man who stepped forward with his night sword prepared Julius stood off Reed as if covering for Emilia, and sharpened his gaze by honing it with knightly spirit. Right before those yellow eyes, Reed changed his expression slightly. Reed, the hell, you. Haven't you gotten a bit better eye? Did something good happen eye? A woman eye. Gotta be a woman, right, you. Julius, I shall not deny that certain events happened which affected my preparedness in many ways, however, I will state that they were not because of involvement with a female. If the embrace of a female can heal a wounded heart, then so can the relentless reprimand of a friend. Reed, still a bastard who keeps beating round the bush, that hasn't changed The hell do you wanna say? Julius, in other words, the fact that I am able to hold my sword like this, is thanks to my friend. An instant after that declaration, Julius tipped up his night sword with sharp footsteps, painting the tip of his sword with beauty enough to make one doubt their eyes, and fired a strike towards Reed's neck. The opponent had not shown any hostility yet, such a thoughtless identification was entirely unneeded. Upon standing at this spot, Reed's thoughts were clearer than fire at night. His unrestrainable sword spirit could fleetingly even be felt on the skins of the bystanders. It was inconceivable that one possessing such sword spirit would remain without using his weapons. Reed was motivated. Just like the previous loop, without giving any regard to the surrounding situation either. Hence, Julius made the preemptive strike without any indecision. That choice was the optimal solution. It could be affirmed that this precise strike aimed for dampening the calm and composed attitude of Reed here, a necessity to capture this first-generation sword saint. The problem was, Reed, do you have any idea what it means to be calm and composed? Reed, that's being able to do anything with flexibility regardless of whatever petty tricks replayed, you idiot, is what it means. It was that Julius' preemptive strike had been intercepted and stopped by the 2 chopsticks Reed held in his hand. Julius, coup. Hook. Reed, well, it wasn't bad, you know? Had I not been the opponent, you would have probably made the opponent taste at least this one. Well then, let's go. Julius, sure hook. Reed laughed like a shark against Julius, who choked on even his biting words. At the same pace, Reed gripped to one chopstick in each of his hands and swept away the tip of the sword, as well as at the same time, stomped ahead and launched blows from his chopsticks. The impact firmly struck the front of the knight sword, giving rise to a clear echo. 2 slim sticks, far shorter than a sword in terms of length, but by being wielded by the expert known as Reed, turned into a weapon far greater than their size and bashed destruction. The moment subsequent to the clear echo, the outbreaking shockwaves made Julius' hair and clothes flutter, and sent cracks in all of the frozen parts of the aisle at once. Literally exceeding norms, going against common sense, a lump of abnormality befitting to be named as an error of the world. Even though Subaru had seen his physical strength several times in the past, seeing the personage himself rendered Subaru speechless. The negativity of the fact that such a monster existed in this world, and the devilish nature of the latent feelings of the designer who decided to include overcoming this monster as one of the conditions for the tower's capture, nauseated his chest. However, Reed, I'm actually impressed a bit. It was unknown how much of Reed's full strength had been applied into that blow of the chopsticks. However, it appeared that even that blow being accepted was out of Reed's calculations, and he commended Julius' fighting spirit for warding off the chopstick strike. Receiving that, Julius squinted his eyes whilst blood seeped out from the edge of his mouth. Julius, after all, I must win against you or otherwise our calculations will flunk, you see. Reed, is it your intent to win why you're barkin' bout? Julius, I'm sure that must be the case. But, allow me to give you company. At that moment, Julius' sword strike brimmed in light and was wildly received away by Reed with his 2 chopsticks. The sword's momentum got deflected, and Julius' stance crumbled was not the case. Julius, having considered his night sword being swept away, rotated and connected the second sword blow with no lag whatsoever. Thus commenced a sword's dance, like the flow of refined water with not a single droplet wasteful. Subaru inhaled, witnessing the sword's dance piling up countless offense and defense with his own eyes. This was at most what Subaru was able to follow with his eyes, yes, only what Subaru had been able to follow his eyes, but this was the proof of Julius Jaculius' willpower and disciplining seeking to reach the sword saint, called to be the pinnacle of the sword. If Reed's might of the sword was like blazing flames, then Julius' swordsmanship was like flowing water. Speaking in terms of basic compatibility, then the water should extinguish the flames. However, the flames here were mighty, so mighty that they could simply evaporate the opposing water and reduce it to nothing. Perhaps, many swordsmen akin to flowing water had been evaporated away by the blazing flames of Reed's swordsmanship. However, at the very least, Julius had no fear of throwing himself in there and getting himself evaporated as he continued launching destructive and unavoidable attacks upon Reed. And Emilia, don't think that your opponent is just Julius. Reed, ha hook. I ain't forgettin', fiercely frizzlin'. Your face is too good to forget. Emilia, thank you for the compliment. But, there is only one person who truly remembered. Emilia joined in on Reed and Julius' swords dance wielding a mountain of armaments of ice. Due to that, Reed turned one of his chopsticks against Julius and the other against Emilia. Whether that could even serve as a countermeasure, such banal sense of values were smashed by Reed's swordsmanship. Glaciation interrupted the sword's dance of blazing flames and flowing water, and the colors of the battlefield altered into further vividness yet again. The cast of the sword's dance had been changed by one, with Reed being the opponent instead of Bat and Cato's, and Emilia and Julius' crude coordination resumed. No, that also changed. Perhaps due to the enemy being stronger, but much more likely that the two of them brought together their battling style in this short interval and made amendments, somehow bringing it all together. Finally, their cooperation turned into actual cooperation. Beatrice, Julius, is matching in with Emilia, in fact. Subaru, you get it? Beatrice, there's also their compatibility on the basis of their personality, I suppose. Emilia showed all her strength clearly, and Julius became capable of moving accordingly, in fact. Probably because of Emilia dropping the need to match in, I suppose. Subaru, what an amazing comment. Regardless, since it was going well, it had to have been the correct judgment. In the end, Emilia did not hold back and did everything at her own pace, and Julius matched in with the easy-to-comprehend movement of the other, adorning himself being his specialty. Reed, haha. Good goin', you all. I'm startin' to have fun too, I. Emilia, hoya. See ya. Hiya. Hiya yaya. Joyfully brushing away the two whilst they cordially engaged with each other, Reed laughed loudly. Emilia then let out a shout and launched a mighty attack one would not think could come from that voice, but it failed to become the decisive blow. A marvelous sword's dance, as if an illusion of water, fire, and ice intertwining. The night sword of steel, the sticks that had seemingly been turned into steel due to the skill and force they were being used with, and the weapons of ice which struck, broke, regenerated, and gave rise to high-pitched notes. A sight so beautiful, capable of making one misunderstand that there was truly such a dance being performed. Shaya-yaya. Henceforth, the dissonant existence which wedged itself and obstructively seared itself into everyone's minds as foreign to both eyes and ears. Subaru, bastard. Hook. Wedging himself obstructively and rudely into the space where the three unfolded their offense and defense, was Bat and Cato's. The young boy who was supposed to have eaten Reed's kick and tumbled into a state of being almost dead. He stood up and rose once again, joining in on the battlefield as if he had not suffered any damage whatsoever. Bat and Cato's swung the daggers fastened to the wrists on both of his hands, alongside combining the battle techniques that made skillful use of his short limbs, he continuously fired fatal attacks onto the three from next to next. They caught Emilia, Julius, and Reed off guard, and the three respectively defended against them, troubled and hurriedly. However, their defense against them was imperfect, and some bits of their hair and clothes got sliced off. Julius, how stubborn of you to not give up, Sin Archbishop. Lay, ahaha. Shunning us and then having fun, stop doing such nasty things, and I-sama. Always and always having it just to yourself, eh? How unfair, truly. Amelia, read. I'm sure you get it. There's no point even if we fight here. Will you help us? Just stay still at the very least, please. Read, what a clueless woman you re, fiercely frizzlin'. I'm enjoyin' myself as things re, you know? Even if the great stars fall from the sky, my plans ain't bend in. The four, whilst waging fierce and heroic blows upon each other, knocked their respective wills onto each other. This was a spectacle of battle, impossible to be approached readily, impossible to reach a common ground, impossible to be disunited from the odor of blood. For an outsider it was difficult to judge who was at an advantage, who was at a disadvantage, who was superior, who was inferior. All what was possible was to hope for their allies' victory, however. Subaru, G.H. Beatrice, Subaru. And Beatrice was astonished to see Subaru, who could do nothing but watch and hope, kneel down whilst gripping onto his chest. Beatrice knelt down, touching Subaru's shoulder as he breathed hoarsely and looked at his face. Beatrice, Subaru, Subaru. What's wrong, in fact? What happened, I suppose? Subaru, no, what is this? Beatrice, Subaru? Against Beatrice's desperate calls, Subaru tightened his grip onto his chest and repeatedly blinked. There was no possibility that he had made a mistake or a move. But even Subaru could not comprehend this. Peculiarly strange, pain, unbelievable heat swelled up in the interior of his chest. His heart was beating at a rate as if it would explode, he could feel every single drop of blood flowing within his body, an awful and incomprehensible sensation as if an alarm bell was sounding off. He did not understand. What was happening to his body right now? This was something that did not happen in any of the loops till now. Some sort of chronic sickness, or even worse, some sort of magical interference had possibly happened. Rushing across all of the knowledge he possessed in his mind, he went through the worst-case possibilities and shook his head. No. This was perhaps not something negative. The alarm bell was sounding only because of a problem. Subaru, wah, ah. Inhaling deeply, he then exhaled. Till now, Subaru's brain had been getting seared by concern for Amelia and Julius, who were fighting Baton Katos and Reed before him. In terms of the situation, his powerless self could do nothing but stand and watch. In this situation, what seared Subaru's brain was the advance of the 5 obstacles, whilst they were busy with this being the 2 remaining obstacles. The 5 obstacles. 1 was the large horde of witch beasts which surrounded the tower. 1 was the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, who would launch an attack on the tower. 1 was Redistria, who would start freely walking around the tower. In the current situation, there were 3 present. The remaining 2 were the Titanic Scorpion, which would wander around the tower with an expression as if it owns the place, and the colossal Black Shadow, which would swallow the tower with fearsome vigor. Those 2 must also be dealt with, or the problems falling upon the tower shall not get disposed of. At the other side of Amelia and Julius' strenuous efforts, the moment he troubled over dealing with the possibilities seeking the collapse of the tower, his chest pounded with heat and made Subaru kneel down. His heart continued beating fiercely. Remaining conscious of his heartbeats, Subaru slowly breathed and closed his eyes. He thought that he should do what his body felt like doing. Abiding by that, he closed his eyes. Seeing Subaru's condition, Beatrice stopped her calls. Perhaps she possessed no affirmation either. Yet she made that gesture. Subaru was blessed to possess such understanding comrades. And, into the back of Subaru's eyeballs, a curious sensation welled up. They were faint, fleeting lights levitating against dim darkness. Subaru? Faint, warm, and blurry lights. There was 1 right beside Subaru, and 2 at slight distance from him. Strangely enough, Subaru comprehended that there were lights behind him without even having to glance backwards. Behind him were 4 lights. 1 of them was at some distance from the rest, and he realized that 1 was approaching overhead. Subaru, Beatrice. Beatrice, hiya hook. For some reason Subaru blindly trusted this sensation and without any hesitation, leapt away from that spot as if jumping at Beatrice. Hugging the young girl's light body in his arms, Subaru tumbled onto the floor, lacking all faltering that instant. He grasped that scorching heat raided the thigh of his right leg as he gave rise to a wail of anguish. Subaru, goohoo. He instantly realized that the burning sensation was generated from a deep wound. Perhaps in an attempt to turn his eyes away from his wounded leg, Subaru looked at Beatrice whilst hugging her. And, forcing his eyes to open through the pain and tears, he saw. Subaru, I knew, it had come, the scorpion. Hook. Subaru threw that up in rage, and what had appeared before him was, this being the second chance meeting with it as well, the Titanic scorpion. The scorpion, possessing a black shell and eyes like red luminous dots, had the rest of its legs crawl on the wall as it lorded over Subaru and the others. Beatrice, ah. In front of the horrifyingly humongous creature, Beatrice widened her eyes. What Beatrice could see in front of her were pincers of the scorpion that had gouged out Subaru's leg deeply. The scorpion ecstatically upheld Subaru's flesh in its pincers, dripping a large amount of blood onto the aisle. He had been worried about the obstruction of the Titanic scorpion. The 5 obstacles he needed to overcome had all assembled here. This was bad. 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 Comprehending how unfavorable the situation was, Subaru tried searching for a means of survival within his thoughts, which were being scorched by ache. However, nothing dawned upon Subaru as to what could bring about a positive change in the situation. Baton Kato's was here, Reed was here, even the Titanic scorpion had appeared. Even if Melee and Shala restrained the horde of witch beasts, the other cards had already failed to function well with these turn of events. This will not do. This path will not do. With a further, different way of action. Subaru. 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 Subaru, gnashing his teeth, was able to hear 3 voices calling for him strike his eardrums. Beatrice's poignant voice, Julia's tensed voice, Emilia's pleading voice. Subaru heard them respectively call for him, and Baton Kato's, Reed, the Titanic scorpion, then moved towards each of them respectively. As if in order to hinder the actions, the road of Natsuki Subaru, but even earlier than that. An impact struck the tower with immense vigor, the entire tower vehemently quaked and a thunderous roar echoed. With the same pace it made Subaru's body, lying on floor jump, blew away Emilia and the others who had unfolded offense and defense, crushed even the Titanic scorpion's shell, as the world crumbled. The small body beside Subaru was hugging him seemingly in order to protect him. Hugging back that soft body, Subaru widened his eyes in the midst of the impact. I love you. Their present was solely the darkness harboring blind love, as it tried to swallow Subaru. At that instant everything in the world, white and black, men and women, love and hate, all had been consumed by the quaking impact, but solely Natsuki Subaru managed escaping it. Subaru. Subaru, Huck. Ohaya Hook. A call to him, as if pulling that in, Subaru hugged the owner of that voice. Within his arms, the body moved about in fluster and panic, looking upwards from the middle of his chest. That was Subaru B. Trice. Beatrice, why yes, I suppose. Doing this suddenly is surprising, in fact. Well, it's not as if Betty doesn't like it, I suppose. But, Betty was just worried that you just returned from the book. But, seeing Betty's name being called first is relieving, I suppose. Yes, Beatrice whispered whilst remaining in Subaru's arms. Hearing her words, Subaru looked around himself. What had happened immediately previously, he had fallen onto the aisle, his leg had also been wounded, and then into that dark, dark shadow. Subaru, library? For the moment, if you could clear whether you were still half asleep or not, then I believe we could proceed with our codes of action as well, Natsuki-kun. That voice struck Subaru, who was astonished to find himself surrounded by the vast amount of books. Upon looking, that had been Echidna, smiling wryly whilst caressing her light purple hair. Behind her was the shelf she leaned on, and Melee, who rested her chin on her hand saying, "You're finally up." Beatrice, wah, wah, wah. Subaru. Subaru, what happened, in fact? Are you not feeling well after all, I suppose? Can you speak about what you saw in the book? Subaru, well, I also need to do that, but... Subaru tightly hugged Beatrice's petite body, and enjoyed her warmth. And recognized the reality that he must recognize. He had returned to this moment. Subaru returned to this moment, having failed to overcome the 5 obstacles. Chapter 66, Second Chance Toward the Denouement. The first thing he did was to make his heart accept the truth that he had returned by death. While stroking the concerned Beatrice's head, who was in his arms, Subaru reflected onto the predicament that he had experienced immediately previously and also were happenings of the future. The fact that he had returned by death meant that he had been unable to evade the circumstance of crises befalling onto his life. Abandoning the disasters he knew would arrive, he had exposed the lives of his comrades to hazard. No, that was naive. That was not what had happened. He had not exposed their lives to hazard. Subaru had let Emilia and the others die. He knew that would be what it would come down to, yet he missed it. The existence of the 5 obstacles assailing the tower, difficult to be neglected. Despite knowing of them, Subaru had failed to evade the problems due to his indiscretion and naivete. At the very last moment, what had perhaps decisively taken his life away had been the colossal black shadow, which relentlessly destroyed this humongous and gigantic tower itself that was, the greatest and the final obstacle. Including that, he arranged the 5 obstacles in his mind again. The first was the large horde of witch beasts, pushing into the tower all at once. The second one was the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, coming with the aim of Subaru's memories and name. The third was the Titanic Scorpion, which invaded into the tower in some time unknown and lurked in a blind spot, subsequently attacking. Fourth was the rampaging Redistria, swaggering about freely in the tower, ignoring all enemies and allies. The fifth one and the last one was the Black Shadow, which swallowed and ruined everything. Their circumstances evolved at the same time, and overlooking even a single one of them would easily cause the entire plan to collapse. Could it be said that the jet black shadow which should rightfully be feared was a gesture of kindness by this unfair and absurd world by notifying Subaru of a time limit? He was in a dilemma whether it was an issue he should feel grateful for. Subaru, leaving the first one, the large horde of witch beasts, to Meili and Shala. This choice could be affirmed to not have been wrong. Last time no, it would be last to last time now, in the loops until last to last time, the 5 obstacles must have also concurrently occurred. Subaru had also witnessed the scenario of the witch beasts invading into the tower. Should that happen, crucial fighting forces like Emilia and Julius would have to face the witch beasts in order to restrain them. That had been avoided in this loop, whereby Meili had survived. The strength of Meili's existence was unmistakably a single step forward. However, it was still not sufficient. Even if the large horde of witch beasts could be held back, Subaru and the others were helpless against the following obstacle. Emilia had gotten her name robbed by the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony who had appeared, and though they somehow managed to have Julius join the fight against Bat and Katos, subsequently Reed partook in the battlefield. Resultantly, the two Emilia and Julius were forced to employ open tactics against the frontiers of both Gluttony and Reed, causing valuable time to be lost, ultimately leading to the Titanic Scorpion's intrusion, and directly hitting the declaration of time up by the shadow. In other words, that balance mustn't happen. Their number of moves were lacking. On top of that, what Subaru feared was if the words of the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony Louis Arnab were correct, 2 of Gluttony were supposed to have arrived. He had encountered Bat and Katos. However, the other one's form was nowhere to be seen. This was bad. This was bad, this was bad, this was bad. At any rate, this was bad. Even though the situation was progressing with every second, even though Subaru alone had got a grasp on all the problems, despite piling up so many deaths he did not have the full picture in clarity. It had taken far too long for him to take a step. Why did his self spend so much time in inactivity? Beatrice, calm down, I suppose. Subaru, ahaya hook. Subaru's brain overhead and almost started fuming. That was when Beatrice strongly sandwiched his cheeks between her 2 small hands and brought his consciousness back to reality through pain. With her hands still on his cheeks, Beatrice resumed at distance close enough to exchange breaths. Beatrice, Subaru, tell what happened in the book, in fact. It'll be fruitless if you take it upon yourself alone, I suppose. Properly talk about it, and it will be thought about together. That is, Betty and the others' forte, in fact. Subaru, what happened in the book, huh? Hearing Beatrice's earnest appeal, Subaru looked down onto the situation he had been placed in. He has accepted the truth that he had returned by death. And similarly, he must also recognize and etch the place he had returned to as well. This place was the library of the 3rd layer of Teijita. In the room surrounded with bookshelves housing countless books of the dead, this was the scene immediately after his consciousness returned from challenging the Book of the Dead of Reed. And, speaking of what had happened to Subaru in the book. Subaru, stand up, happened. Beatrice, eh? Subaru, no, I mean I got my back kicked and was driven out of giving up. Shit, this is so pathetic. I've made no progress at all. Subaru scratched his head in front of Beatrice, who rounded her eyes. Subsequently he stood up whilst keeping Beatrice in his grasp, and slowly looked towards the environs towards the 2 of Echidna and Meili. The members who had been waiting for Subaru to wake up. He was already aware of what the missing Emilia and Ram, Shala and Julius were doing. The circumstances were already breaking forth, there was no time to halt. That is why. Subaru, I'll cut it short. I failed to see Reed's memories in the Book of the Dead. Something got in the way. Books of the dead are connected to the souls of the existence called Od Lagna, that is where I encountered a problematic one. Hearing Subaru's short and quick explanation, the three widened their eyes in surprise. Subaru gestured an apology for not giving them the time to halt and give thought to it, and continued his words. Them being Subaru, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, Louis Arnab, has declared war on us. Echidna, though I must say, we come so far to the boundary in the east and Sin Archbishops again, huh? It seems that there is a profound and immeasurable connection between them and Natsuki-kun. After listening to his explanation, Echidna ridiculed Subaru's circumstances with that comment. Whilst hearing that comment, Subaru and the others jumped and descended the staircase of the library, moving in order to reunite with their comrades who had distanced themselves from Teijida. Subaru, unfortunately, I happen to have amnesia. I have no idea about having a relationship with these Sin Archbishop folks if it was worth calling profound. Am I really that connected to them? Beatrice, at the very least, they are the ones responsible for making Betty and the others come to this tower, I suppose. Made a long journey through the desert, seeking a solution to what all they had done. Subaru, I thought I had heard just the surface of the aim behind coming to this tower, so they were the true origin. They really can't do anything better. Frowning in tediousness, Subaru was stumped by happening to have a destined relationship with unpleasant parties. Although he did not press them much about it, both Beatrice and Echidna did not limit the people he was connected to as only gluttony. If Subaru's ideas were correct, then there were perhaps 7 people who were all Sin Archbishops, thus he conjectured that the ones he had gotten involved with had not been solely gluttony. Subaru, that depresses me, so I don't want to talk about it right now. Oh. Echidna. Subaru, you're also there. And, when Subaru and the others returned to the 4th layer and sprinted towards the aisle, the person who came dashing towards them just in time, Julius, raised a voice of surprise. Last time as well, Julius had returned to Teijita in order to inform Echidna and Subaru of the atypical situation surrounding the tower. They had now encountered him a bit earlier. Seeing Subaru having safely returned from the Book of the Dead, Julius said. Julius, so you are safe, Subaru. Did you secure the vital information from the Book of the Dead? Subaru, though it'll be the same explanation as what I gave to Beatrice and the others, that failed. The detailed explanation is a question for me later, so I'd like to solve these abnormal circumstances concurrently. Julius, what do you mean, in other words? Subaru, it means I can guess what the situation basically is. Right now, witch beasts are surrounding the tower, right? The moment Subaru fired his question, an immense tremor jolted the tower. That indistinct and constant something akin to tremors reached everyone present inside the tower. Its cause being correctly guessed made Julius gaze in slight wonderment. However, he immediately lowered his chin and nodded. Julius, just as you say. Currently, the environs of this Pleiades watchtower have been besieged by a great number of witch beasts. At the outer edge of the tower, Miss Shala is aggressively struggling and stalling the witch beast's invasion, but Meili, if the identity of these tremors is a horde of bad animalchans, then, no matter how strongly the naked one Isen may stand, she'll eventually not be able to restrain them, huh? Julius, henceforth, I want you to lend your strength. What do you say, Meili? Meili jumped into the conversation, and Julius faced and requested her with sincerity. Accepting his sincerity, Meili turned a profoundly meaningful gaze towards Subaru and the others. Getting the impression that the gaze intended to ask about the pros and cons about her actions, Subaru lightly inhaled and nodded. Subaru, I'm requesting you too, Meili, nothing will get sorted if it isn't for you. Sorry for this being so sudden, but please cooperate so that we can all take a step forward together. Meili, Geez, Oni-san, still so pathetic even after saying such grand words. But, since you asked me earnestly, leave that place to me. Be grateful. Subaru, my heartfelt gratitude. I love you. Meili, how petty. Making a sour look in response to Subaru's gratitude, Meili consented to cope with the witch beasts. With this, one of the 5 obstacles will be cleared. Till now it had been the same as last time. Hence. Julius, well then, let's take her to Miss Shala. Subaru, no, we will be taking a different code of action. Meili, do you know where the balcony is? Work together with Shala there, and somehow stall the witch beasts. Meili, the end of the aisle, right? Really, you don't know how to treat people. Hearing that, Meili spilled a sigh and dashed off. Though languid and unenthusiastic, he understood that that was her own pose, seeing her move in accordance with Subaru's orders. That was, as fast as she could run. And Julius, Subaru, with the witch beasts aside, you seem to possess confirmation of some sort. What are you aware of? Subaru, I guess so. I'll explain it along the way. Come with me for now. We must hurry, or Emilio-chan and the others will be in danger. Julius, Huck. Julius widened his eyes in astonishment, and Subaru ran after patting his shoulder. He held Beatrice in his arms, and Echidna hurried behind them as well. Julius had been stumped for a moment but shook his head, and caught up to his back quickly. Subaru, earlier I told you that I failed to dive into the Book of the Dead, right? I couldn't see Reed's memories. Instead of that, I came across another chap over there. I encountered the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony. Julius, no way. Why would gluttony be in the Book of the Dead? Hearing the name of the enemy he had a connection to, Julius' expressions froze. Echidna called out to his side profile saying Julius. She alone was making an expression of feeling chagrined pertaining to the speed of her feet, as she raised a single finger. Echidna, according to what Natsuki-kun had said, the books of the dead are an apparatus of the cradle of Od Lagna. The Hall of Memories in order to take custody of the memories of the dead, the paths of life walked. And, the Sin Archbishops of Gluttony eat the memories and names of others. In other words, Julius, their authority, is making use of that end of Od Lagna's power? No, you said that you met gluttony in the book, right? If that's so, then Subaru, the reason behind your memory loss is. Subaru, yeah, it's nothing like the tower's trap or mechanism. Sheer FOE. It was an accident caused by a random encounter, is what it means. The same way of victimization as you say. It was impossible to imagine having to encounter gluttony when facing the Book of the Dead. That too, if Subaru and the others' imagination last time had been correct, then the Book of the Dead possessing the possibility of encountering gluttony was solely the Book of Reed, who had been reconstructed in the tower. How terrible a fortune would one need for that to happen? He also wanted to object to the deeds of the Subaru until yesterday. Such that he had started wanting to believe idle gossip like truly had a connection with the Sin Archbishops. Julius, for it to be the same as this, quite an awful preference I must say. However, if there had been contact between you and gluttony at the point of last night, then this charge of the witch beasts too? Beatrice, it would mean that the enemy ended up getting the time of more than half a day for making preparations, I suppose. Had Subaru remembered, matters might have been. Ah. Betty is not reproaching Subaru, in fact. Subaru, I know. But, it's a matter of course that you'd reproach me. It would have been better had the me until yesterday not made this blunder, it would have been better if the present me was smarter. Had that been the case, they would have surely been able to face the enemy in a further prepared state. But saying that now was pointless. Contesting with all cards they possessed, that was vital. What was needed was readiness, decisiveness, and the intent to have faith in oneself aside, in comrades. Subaru, just as what you judged, the horde of witch beasts is gluttony's doing. On top of that, gluttony himself will march in and enter. And will be aiming for Emilio-chan and the others. And before Subaru and the others reach, having been late at noticing, the isolated force of Emilia will be coerced into making strenuous efforts and letting Ram and the rest escape, calling the result of getting her name getting eaten upon herself. They must stop that from happening this time. For that purpose, he had taken shortcuts in several positions of the game. Subaru, if we don't let Emilio-chan's name get robbed. Perhaps, they might avoid Ram having to withdraw from the warfront. Last time, the reason why Ram was unable to undertake action was the result of Baton Kato's stealing Emilia's name, for she had been unable to catch Emilia's lack of existence and the absence of memories. Should that risk be done away with, it would be plausible to expect Ram's existence as war potential. Should they hold on to Ram and take care of her, whom she had brought with herself, then there shouldn't be any issues in that regard either. And if the tag team of Emilia and Ram could hold Baton Kato's down. Subaru, Julius. There's a job you have to do as well. We'll somehow manage things with gluttony. The opponent you've been connected to as well. I very well get your feeling of wanting to send him flying, but... Julius, but, what? In this place, an opponent which should be prioritized above gluttony can't. Subaru, raid will come down. If he manages to interfere, then everything will come down to nothing. There's the role, to stop that. Receiving that elucidation, the repeated surprise yielded wrinkles on Julius' middle forehead yet again. However, rather than meager astonishment this time it was composed more of perplexity and doubt. It was a matter of course. The attack and raid by the large horde which beasts and the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony. Both of those could be disposed of as things he heard directly by Gluttony in the Book of the Dead. However, matter shall differ should Reed's existence get tangled with that. There was no point of contact between the existence of Reed and gluttony. Because at the very least, the facility of the tower and the Sin archbishops were unrelated. Henceforth, seeking a logical basis for that explanation was not possible. Julius, if that is true, then let's assume Reed Istria shall arrive downstairs. In this state of affairs, the possibility of him acting whilst ignoring them. Subaru, can't imagine that happening, right? Really? Does he seem to be the type of guy who would be influenced by the surrounding situation? Beatrice, sorry, but Betty can't imagine that happening, in fact. That thing has the nature to prioritize what he wants to do, I suppose. No matter what the situation. Beatrice assented on the basis of an unpleasant confirmation whilst being carried in Subaru's arms. Julius reached the conclusion hearing her and then looked at Echidna, as if asking for final thoughts. Echidna shrugged her petite shoulders in response to his gaze. Echidna, I agree as well. Regardless, it is difficult to believe he would start walking around freely in the tower. Though it would be more accurate to say that I don't want to believe that. Nestuki-kun, that information too? Subaru. That's right. I heard from Gluttony. After hesitating for a moment, Subaru nodded and boldly lied, responding to Echidna's question. As a matter of fact, the possibility of Gluttony playing a role in the sequence of events of Reed walking freely was slim. At the very least, Bat and Katos had been surprised by Reed's presence, and looking at how they dealt with each other, he must not have summoned Reed as an ally either. That's why this had been entirely unable to convey the authenticity of the information Subaru had and was more like a safeguard. Listening to Subaru's answer, who was at a somewhat rough spot, Julius dove into his thoughts, making a strained face. However, even when they were troubled with thoughts, time continued to flow moment by moment. Especially presently, the situation of the tower was worsening, with the horde of witch beasts and Sin archbishops. Recognizing that fact, Echidna called out, saying, Julius. Echidna, in the present situation, I am also hesitant about keeping distance from visible threats and turning towards potential hazards. But, Natsuki-kun's words. Julius should be trusted. Yes, I know, Echidna. To be honest, I find it regrettable to turn away from the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, a bitter enemy of mine as well. However, Subaru Reed Istria can only be left to you. Just as I told you earlier. Julius, if I don't win, our calculations will fail, was it? Geez, such incorrigible killing words. Should their calculations fail, should the gears come disjointed, perhaps what would be yielded forth would be a tragedy lacking reason. As if having caught a glimpse of that in Subaru's earnest, black eyes, Julius let out a deep sigh. Julius, I promise you. I shall take the responsibility for Reed. However, if things turn out that he cannot move from the second layer, then I shall join you. Any objections? Subaru, none. There can't be anything better than you being free and Reed being immobile. I leave the timely judgment up to you, but it's your duty to win against Reed as well, you know. Julius, very well, I understand. Echidna, Beatrice-sama, I shall leave the rest to you. Subaru, leave it to me. Subaru distorted his cheeks at the remark of the other two aside from himself being entrusted with it, whereas Julius smoothly caressed his bangs and gallantly turned their back towards them. The cuffs of his white clothes getting disordered, Julius kicked the floor with his lengthy legs and headed for the staircase to the second layer. Echidna, I will not press you much regarding how you got that affirmation. Echidna, what is important is that we trust you. I will appreciate it if you don't betray mine or his feelings. Subaru, I don't know what you're talking about, but you have my gratitude. Having seen off Julius back, Echidna addressed in a low tone. The true intent of those words identified the lack of connection between Reed and Gluttony. Gulping down that unease, Echidna and Julius made the gesture of trusting Subaru's discourse. He must respond to their trust, their expectations. Subaru, ugh. Abruptly, just when his mind came upon such thoughts, a chilling sensation rose in the interior of Subaru's chest. Beatrice furrowed her eyebrows upon Subaru's response, but Subaru narrowed his eyes and turned away from her reaction. He had memories of this warmth. It was the queer warmth he had tasted immediately prior to being swallowed by the shadow in the previous loop. His heart rate increasing, Subaru suffered the chilling warmth and closed his eyes. What levitated at the back of his eyelids were balls of light shivering with fleetingness and transience. One within his arms and one right next to him, and one in the direction Subaru was facing. Subaru, let's hurry. We all have to go by ourselves and join Emilia-chan and the others. Echidna, that is all well and good, but will we be of any help? To say it clearly, the present you and Beatrice, and me on top of that, we are all non-combatants. Beatrice, Betty can act as a bit of fighting force upon wanting to fight. Besides, Subaru must not be aiming to be a reinforcement either, I suppose. With Subaru having sprinted ahead, Beatrice and Echidna exchanged their views. Echidna's anxiety was undisputable, and Beatrice's idea was correct. Sadly enough, Subaru and the others could not act as reinforcement for Emilia in terms of war potential. Instead of them, Ram, Barusu. So you have woken up. Subaru, Ram. By the edge of the aisle, the same spectacle as before appeared the figure of Ram on Patrash's back, with Rem in her arms. She jauntily jumped off Patrash's back and handed over the reins to Subaru. Ram, you took too long to wake up. Look after Rem. Protect her with the will to die. You won't be excused if you hurt her or touch her in a weird manner. Ram will. Subaru, wait, in a lot of ways you're too fast. I get what you're talking about, but calm down. You are. Ram, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony is here. Emilia-sama is fighting back, but she won't fare well. Ram must return immediately, or it will be too late. That instant, the emotions recurring within Subaru's chest twisted. He was relieved pertaining to Ram, who hurriedly wanted to return to the battlefield, and hearing Emilia's name from her mouth, and rage sprouted for the abominable Baton Kato's existence being confirmed, his bitter enemy. Keeping those aside, Subaru handed over the reins he had been given to Echidna. Subaru, Echidna. I'm counting on you to take Rem and Patrash to a safe zone. The balcony or the second layer won't do. You can't get close to the green room right now either. Probably Teijida should be the safest. Echidna, Natsuki-kun, what about you? Subaru, Beatrice and I will go with Ram for the Sin Archbishop. Subaru glared into the pale cerulean eyes of Echidna, who had been startled by suddenly being handed over the reins. Whilst she inhaled faintly, Subaru caressed Patrash's neck and jerked his chin, seeing Rem on its back. Subaru, earlier, you had said to not betray your trust. I'm counting on you for the same. Rem is in your hands. She is an indispensable girl for Natsuki Subaru. Echidna, what a curious thing to say. Even though you yourself are supposed to be Natsuki Subaru. Subaru, I also trust you for understanding my feelings a bit, you know? He had heard that the existence of Echidna consisted of having borrowed the body of the young girl named Anastasia. That could also be said to be a position similar to the present Natsuki Subaru, who was overwriting the existence Natsuki Subaru with himself. Receiving those words from Subaru, Echidna made a staggered expression. Echidna, Natsuki-kun, could it be that you are? Subaru, I am counting on you. Not letting Echidna complete her words, Subaru sprinted, leaving her and the rest behind. Ram had already been heading towards the front of the aisle, leaving whilst catching a small glimpse of Rem's sleeping face atop Patrash's back and stimulating her own courage. Ram, why did you come, Barusu? Rem is. Subaru, Rem said, to do what needs to be done instead of looking after her. That was preached to me in the book. Ram, Huck. By Rem? What does that mean? Ram's light crimson eyes gave way to unrest upon Subaru's words, who was right next to her. It was just that they simply did not have enough time for him to cordially and courteously explain the events of the Hall of Memories. That's why Subaru conveyed only what was utmost important briefly. Subaru, Rem said to fight and regain. That's why, I'll go with you too. Beatrice, of course, don't forget that Betty is there too, in fact. Ram. That is fine, for now. You'll be cross-questioned about it 100 times later. Subaru, isn't 100 a bit too scary? Subaru shivered, since he couldn't even hear it to be a joke in Ram's case. However, it was her compassion for letting Subaru bypass through that despite not explaining a single crucial thing. And, the circumstance where that was required to be done, approached right in front of their eyes. Ice Brand Arts. The following moment, Emilia's back was visible in the center of the frozen aisle as she fluttered danced about with armaments of ice. Confronting her was the Sin Archbishop of dirty appearance, Baton Kato's. Catching sight of that, Ram shouted. Ram, Emilia-sama. Subaru conceived that they had made it in time, considering that was Emilia's name. And at the same time, Emilia noticed them behind upon being called and responded with a Ram. Emilia, why did you come back? And Subaru and Beatrice too, I'm glad you're okay. But this is really dangerous right now. Stay back. Get away. Rem has been evacuated to someplace safe. Now on, Ram shall also assist you in battle. Emilia, but, Ram, you are. Ram, to be taken away, even if you say that, do you think Ram will allow being taken away? Whilst responding to Emilia, Ram reached to her legs and unsheathed the slender wand equipped there. The wand was shorter than what normally magicians could be imagined to have. Though it seemed like an article with no peculiarities, it could also be felt that it exerted a sense of enigma and queer pressure. And, seeing Ram's form preparing to use it, Gluttony laughed at a distance away from Emilia. Lay, ah ha ha. What's this, so you came back, Ne-sama? Oh dear, how handsome. Why is Ne-sama so cool? Truly, Ne-sama is wonderful too. Ram, irksome. You're getting killed, Sin Archbishop. Ram fired her quiet intent to kill towards the Sin Archbishop, clapping his hands and guffawing. It was intense rage enough to send chills down Subaru's spine, who had never been faced by it, as he glanced from the side. Despite receiving that direct eye contact, Baton Kato's composure did not flinch whatsoever. Lay, how nice, so nice, very nice, quite nice, as it's nice, isn't it nice, as it's probably nice, as it's perhaps nice, as we think it's nice. Gluttonous drinking Sue. Glutton eats Sue. We apologize for arbitrarily and overwhelmingly bringing an end to the connection. Though in actuality, it was supposed to be a much more touching reunion, you know. Ram, what are you? Lay. Something like stealing the name and memories of a valuable person feels like becoming the greatest enemy upon being thought of revenge, right? Yet, the people eaten by us, in most cases, don't remember about that is what it means. Even though we understand Ne-sama this much, Ne-sama doesn't know even the slightest bit of that feeling is what it means. That's like a wasteful way of usage, like showering salt onto a salivatingly high-quality ingredient, isn't it? Attentively and profoundly, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony commenced explaining circumstances completely impossible to be referred to. The truth was, the power Gluttony wielded of stealing the memories of others was an act equivalent to trampling upon life. Should family members, lovers, benefactors be attacked and hunted down by them, the worst possible phenomenon would be that they would be forgotten and disappear onto the other side of oblivion, and the hatred which was supposed to exist would also vanish. In one way, that would function as safety against letting anyone take revenge on themselves. However, Lay, isn't he that the greatest level of boring? However, none other than Baton Kato's declared it to be boring. Lay, like the rich hatred which was originally supposed to be attained, or the rumbling corrupted rage, such freshly aromatic and fetid emotions get thoroughly denied is what it means. That's a great loss for us. Until the Onii-san over there shows up. Subaru, me. Lay, say Onii-san, for some reason even after we eat the name you can still remember that person, right? We pretty much do get the reason behind that? The place Onii-san was born into must have been a bit different from here, but what's important is its result. Onii-san is our savior. While saying so, Baton Kato's opened his arms wide and continued looking at Subaru with an intoxicated expression. With a passionate and zealous gaze as if he was truly deeply in love with Subaru. Lay, no, let's dare state it this way. Onii-san is our hero too. Innocent, hardworking, uneasy unless someone is by his side, mean, makes our chest sting and hurt the more we think about it, on top of that, a hero who understands those feelings. Subaru, stop with such eerie comments. With what intention are you? Lay, of course, these are emotions from the bottom of the heart. How harsh, how pathetic. Even though we are so gallantly, we are so wholeheartedly, thinking of Onii-san, you know. Subaru could not comprehend how true a remark that was, composed of blended emotions. He couldn't imagine it, neither did he want to. However, taking Baton Kato's comments until now into account, it naturally became clear. The emotions of the existence captured by him, directed towards Subaru, were being no, deception was unnecessary. The emotions of Rem, who had been captured by him, were being. Lay, how about it, eh? If it suits you, then let's repeat that touching passion once again. Let's start from here, Onii-san Sue. From square one, no. From ZE. Emilia, hiya. Lay, whoopsie. At that instant, after having stalked up to Baton Kato's rear, Emilia slammed the large ice hammer she held in both of her hands into the back of the Sin Archbishop's head mercilessly. Baton Kato's spilled the words in a ridiculing tone as if in a manga or something and fell towards the front. Engrossed in recreating the memories, he lost his attention from those other than Subaru. Even so, he must have still remained vigilant of Ram, but the ones he ought to have paid attention to were not merely Subaru and Ram. Beatrice, Morak, I suppose. Along with Emilia, I snuck up to him, and bam. Subaru, we won? Emilia, I did it. The silent and inactive Bat and Katos, while Amelia made a triumphant pose with her fist clenched, nodding towards Beatrice, who reciprocated. Subaru widened his eyes at the far too quick conclusion. Beatrice, the curtain fell way too quickly, in fact. Ram, indeed. Where should Ram take these feelings when she was just about to tear that thing to pieces? Amelia-sama. Amelia, what? Was it wrong? Ram. No, it was splendid. Yes, truly splendid. Beatrice, who was being hugged by Subaru, and Ram expressed their disappointment for the collapsed gluttony. Ram, who had the connection between her and the bitter enemy trampled by in an unexpected manner, seemed to have a complex state of mind pertaining to Amelia's action. However, Subaru, well, there's certainly a mountain of stuff I'd like to say, but the words which come up the first are Amelia-chan, good job. With this, we should tie up gluttony and. Unfortunately, it can't be allowed to go that way, Onie-san. Before Subaru, who was thinking that the second of the 5 obstacles had been digested in an unexpected fashion, Bat and Kato slowly and relaxedly stood up despite being supposed to have collapsed motionlessly. Subaru widened his eyes in response to that unnatural movement, whilst Beatrice stiffened herself. Of course, Amelia and Ram also had a hue of vigilance paint their eyes. Ram, did he go crazy by getting hit in the head? Also considering his courting comments towards Barusu, if he can't discern the situation then. All that is fine. We have also already conveyed our feelings, and neither do we intend to do something like hold back. Intercepting Ram's views, Bat and Katos remained with his eyes cast downwards after standing up, hiding his face behind those long, dark brown hair. He muttered and whispered something. As if overlapping with those whispers, a distorted and repulsive sound echoed through the aisle. Amelia, no way. Amelia blinked her amethyst eyes in response to the bizarre happening accompanying the repulsive echo. What was being reflected in her beautiful eyes was Bat and Kato's body changing from its very skeletal structure, giving rise to a distorted report. The flesh body of the petite youth changed into a muscly and brawny giant. A nightmarish occurrence, but what was truly nightmarish for Subaru was waiting ahead. Yay, Onie-san, were you surprised? This is solar eclipse. Well, kind of like one of our trump cards? Unlike earlier, this time we'll make you ours through sheer force. Subaru, you sure are saying some pretty eerie stuff, transgender bastard. You are. Seized with nightmarish dread, Subaru asked whilst sweating cold. Receiving that, the giant smiled sweetly and without hiding his eccentric ambience, bowed. Louis, which cults in Archbishop representing gluttony, Louis Arnab. Louis, can't stay for much long. By snitching and eating, we must clean up everything while Onie-chan is asleep, you see. End of chapters 65 and 66.